Hello everyone, this is Fuzzfinger, and as you can probably see, I've just come outside of the house, and overnight we've had about, well, I don't know exactly how much here, but around some parts of the UK there's been about 30 centimetres of snow. So I thought I'd come out, see what's going on, and maybe we could just have a little bit of a chat about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which isn't actually happening, but there's still a lot of talk about it. Well, there has been for quite a while, as you know. But before we do that, I just want to show you some of this snow. So if I just turn the camera around, it looks like something out of a Christmas card. It's all very pretty, also very bloody cold. We didn't actually have any snow last year. So this is our garden. You can't actually see much of it though, because it just looks pretty much white. And I'm a bit annoyed because I can't seem to find my gloves either. So my hands are bloody freezing. But you can just about probably see how deep it is as well. My foot goes right down, probably about 15, maybe 20 centimetres here. So definitely the most snow we've had in a few years, which is all very interesting. But yeah, that's not the main reason for this video, as I mentioned. And since my brain is a little bit frozen, my thoughts might not be as coherent as they otherwise would be. But I just want to talk about Final Fantasy VII, the remake, since we are playing through the game at the moment on my channel. And if you haven't yet checked it out, I encourage you to do so. It's an old school game, but a lot of fun, even after so many years. Anyway, the question I think that a lot of us have been asking is, since the fans have been requesting a remake for Final Fantasy VII for so long, why in the world haven't Square Enix announced the game? And it's interesting, a few days ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago now, they said that if they were to release a copy, release a remake of Final Fantasy VII, and it lived up to the standards that we was all expecting it to, then this would actually be the end of their company. I think what they're saying is that the current releases of Final Fantasy games, such as Final Fantasy 13 and perhaps Final Fantasy 14, which as we all know so far has been a massive failure, they just would not live up to the standards that they would want to set with a Final Fantasy 7 remake. To be honest, I'm not sure what I think of that reasoning. I mean, even if they released a game that wasn't Final Fantasy VII up to the standards that they should be releasing their games at, would that not have the same effect? Who knows? And wow, I just want to show you this snow here. It's so deep. Just put the camera down there, look at this. Don't know if you can see that. That's probably about 25 centimetres. So yeah, it's all good. Just try and get the angle of this right. But as we've been playing through it, and I'm sorry that I'm shivering, I've got this hat on but I'm still freezing bloody cold. But the snow doesn't come often, so I do try and take advantage of it when it's here. But as we was talking about in the videos when we was doing the Let's Play, some of the scenes in Final Fantasy VII, I just don't know if they would work out in a HD remake of the game. I mean, there's some pretty dodgy dialogue and some pretty dodgy scenes that, yes, they work well when you've got no voice acting, when you've got badly sprites for graphics, badly drawn sprites on pre-rendered backgrounds. For instance, if you think about the scene where Cloud cross-dresses into a woman in Wall Market, and him, Tifa and Ares get picked by Don Corneo to be his sex slave for the night or whatever. In a full HD remake, that scene might actually become a little bit awkward with fully voice acted characters. In the game as it stands, it's fun, it's entertaining, and it works well. But in a remake, Square would probably have to change a few things just so the game could be played by children. Yet on the other hand, how can they change it without damaging the integrity of what fans love so much about the original game? So there's definite issues there that would have to be overcome, I think. with the actual scenes in the game. It's scenes similar to that, but not just that. So it's not the only example, but it's the only example I could think of at the minute in this weather. Right then, I think the other thing, and Square have actually mentioned this themselves, is if you look at the HD Final Fantasy games we've got, so Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13-2, just having to swap hands here every now and then because I've got no gloves on. Keep one hand in the pocket, one hand on the camera. If you look at the HD games we've got at the moment, they're fairly linear. And Final Fantasy VII, although it is quite linear, it also has a heck of a lot of environments, and it does have a lot of open areas. And Square pretty much said that if they were to create the same sort of quality for a Final Fantasy VII remake that they created for, say, Final Fantasy 13 or Final Fantasy 13-2, we're talking about graphics-wise, model-wise, then all these pre-rendered environments that will turn out really massive would take so much development time that it would probably take about 10 years just to build half the game. And this is something that I'm not making up because Square Enix themselves have actually said so. So once again, to do a Final Fantasy VII remake, they're either going to have to invest a lot more people, a lot more time, a lot more money in than the game would probably ever generate, or they're going to have to fundamentally change the game to something we don't recognise, in which case, what is the actual point in doing the remake in the first place? So, finally, to finish off, because I'm starting to go numb here, I'd probably just want to ask, do I think, in my personal opinion, that we will ever get to see a Final Fantasy VII remake from Square? And my answer, probably not the answer that you want to hear, but it's the truth, so that's all I can say, is I genuinely do not know. At this point in time, I would be very surprised, in all honesty, if Square did announce that they're working on a Final Fantasy VII HD remake. I believe they've looked into it. I believe they've researched it. I believe they've even put a considerable amount of time into deciding whether or not they would do one. But until technology changes, or it comes to a point where they could invest the time into Final Fantasy VII and make it look as we would expect it to from an HD remake, but without that having to cost too much money, because remember, Final Fantasy VII was never designed. It was never designed to play on the current generation consoles. By that I mean, games are designed differently nowadays. Artists have to work longer on models, on backgrounds, on CGI, because obviously it has to look better to meet today's standards, and that's a completely different kettle of fish when you're designing a game, where you put your resources, etc. Final Fantasy VII was not designed with those sort of resources in mind. And Square have basically got a choice, as I've mentioned. They can either keep waiting, which is what I think they're going to do, until a time where Final Fantasy VII can be brought back to look as we would expect it to look, or they can basically botch the job up, cut loads of bits out, redo the scenes, redo the open exploration aspect of the game so that they can do it in HD with better graphics, in which case it's no longer really Final Fantasy VII. And this also brings me to my final point, and this is the final point, because if I try and make any more points after this, I'm going to turn into a frozen Fuzzfinger snowman. My final point is, Square obviously realise that that if they announced a Final Fantasy VII remake, the amount of expectation that would be on that title and that game would be absolutely, well, if I can use a spacey term, absolutely astronomical. It really would. And they'd almost, just by announcing the game, they'd almost be setting themselves up for failure. Let's be honest, the amount we've all loved Final Fantasy VII, the original game, we have to inevitably ask the question that if Square Enix were to remake it, no matter how much talent they use to design this game, no matter how many resources, how much money, how much time they put into it, could they ever create a game that would live up to our expectations as the fans? Could they ever create a game that would match the emotion, the raw emotion that was produced in the original? I don't think they can. Because since Final Fantasy VII, which incidentally was probably many of our first RPG experience. I mean, before Final Fantasy VII, I don't even think I played an RPG. I mean, since then I've played all the Final Fantasy games, right up to Final Fantasy 1 through to 6. The only one I haven't really played is Final Fantasy 14. I played the beta, but couldn't get into it, so left that. But Final Fantasy VII was the first RPG experience for the majority of us who remember it so fondly. Since then, we've been experienced with the genre on a much bigger scale. And there's been some great games, but because they weren't our first experience, they could not match the raw power and raw emotion of the original Final Fantasy VII. And so true, if a remake is given to us, how could that even match that same potential that the original game met? I don't think it could. So yeah, I think Square are being extremely wary and probably making the right decision at the minute in not announcing the remake. So those are my thoughts. I hope you'll let me know in the comments section what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What have I missed? Am I talking complete baloney? If so, I've got an excuse. Let me just show you the snow before we finish off. And my camcorder's soaking wet, so hopefully it's still going to work. That's front of my house. It's got snow all over it. That's the field opposite. You can't really see it. The horses in it are looking a bit cold. And should be at work today, but pretty much the country seems to have stopped. No one's at work. All the schools have closed. My kids are at home watching telly when they should really be working, but hey, what can you do? But yes, those are a few of my thoughts. As I mentioned, please let me know what you think, and if we can, get some discussions going. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.